Dun, dun. I'm stealing this from Rob. Dun, 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 dun. Hey everyone, D here, and welcome to our finally, as we get to our big Agent Carter Season 2 look back with, of course, all of our standard fans here coming around. Let's be sure to say hi to them right here next to me on top. It's Mr. Rob Stone.
What's up, everybody? Glad to finally be back with the full panel, with the internet issues finally being solved, at least knock on wood, and ready to talk with the gang about Agent Carter Season 2. So I will take it to the man downstairs, our U.S. agent, Mr. Don Willie.
Greetings, everyone. Yes, it is so good to be back, discussing Agent Carter Season 2. Damn you, Kevin Feige. You had better make this canon in the MCU, and you had better revive this show for Disney Plus.
Yes.
Amen, Corrie?
Yes, I'm just so glad to be back. It's been so long. I'm wearing my hat, and apparently now I'm cosplaying as Dottie instead of Peggy. Or I'm cosplaying as Dottie, cosplaying as Peggy.
Either one of those works. Yes, of course. As long watchers have known, we've been trying to get to season 2 for a couple of months. But as 2021 has continued to be adventurous, we've had personal issues come up. We've had internet technology issues. We, of course, have 2 full seasons of brand new Marvel shows we had to talk about. So finally, before Loki gets started in 2 weeks, we're going to spend these next 2 weeks just taking our time, enjoying and discussing season 2 of Agent Carter. So just want to be sure that I say hello to Souza. As always, managing to get here live to join us in the chat. Souza, always a pleasure to have you here with us. And so let's just dive kind of into things. So Agent Carter Season 2 gets renewed in May of 2015. Inserted in is the sort of mid-season break with Season 3 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And reception-wise, does well, mostly. Critics mostly enjoyed it. Was more of a consistent season. Really loved our villain, Whitney Frost. But it didn't totally hit. A lot of people didn't like the way it ended, which we will get into next week, into all of that. Few other critiques here and there. Basically, viewership went down. It didn't have the numbers. And unfortunately, despite a lot of pushing from the fans, in May of 2016, Agent Carter was officially canceled. So this is kind of a bittersweet season in the sense that it does sort of start to set up some bigger storylines, some new directions, and we just get sort of left disappointed in that sense. But we still have a great season to talk about. So let's sort of kick things off. Corrie, as always, I want to start with you. What did you think kind of coming into the season? What were you sort of hoping to see? Did you have any expectations? And then when the season came out, what did you think about what they delivered?
Ooh, I gotta cast my mind back a ways now and try to remember what did previous me think. I was just glad that we got another season, because I do remember it being questionable for a bit whether or not we were going to get season 2.
Right.
And so just learning we were getting season 2 was a huge hooray, yay, more Peggy, awesome. I was expecting more of the characters from season 1 to transfer over to season 2. So, for example, I think it was Angie, that's the waitress. She just kind of disappeared. So that was a bit of a downer in a sense. I was hoping she'd show up, but I loved that we had Dottie. And I adore the opening for the second season, how they kind of copy the first season opening, but then they circumnavigate our expectations around who's wearing that hat, and it's not who we think it is, which I thought was great. Yeah, and getting to see more of Jack Thompson being his wonderfully adorable self.
It's a kind way of putting it. Yes.
He says under duress. Yeah, and it felt like a lighter, more fun season. It felt more fun. I think that was a reflection of the new location, the fact that we were on a different coast. Yeah, it just felt sort of like they injected new life into the material, and we were off on this new adventure. So I was excited.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I think definitely the change to LA again just changes the view. You have Hollywood, you have sunshine, it's brighter. There's sort of a whole different feel, and of course, Carter herself, a little bit of a different agent at this point, more experienced. The way everyone is looking at her, so it is sort of a nice shift on there. Dawn, what about you? What did you think coming into the season, and how did it deliver for you?
So this one was very interesting because now you have Peggy kind of getting over the sexism hurdle from season one, but only by that much, only by that much, because even though the guys in her office know what she's done, what she's capable of, still Thompson got the credit for what happened at the end of last season and that whole thing, and they made him the new chief. We got Daniel, who kind of got I don't know if heartbroken is the word, but he was kind of like, all right, well, he wanted to be Peggy's guy, and when that didn't happen, he miraculously got a promotion and decided to move to LA. Yeah, so it was obviously a different dynamic there, and then moving it to now Hollywood, and now we have a different thing where the one thing that kind of got me about this was I guess the sanitized racial politics a little bit.
Okay,
Marvel,
fair enough.
Marvel does tend to do that. So it was one of those things where it kind of threw me for a loop a bit when Wilkes first introduces himself, and then we'll get to that. But yeah, it was just kind of like, I don't know if that would, I don't know if that would happen. Even in cosmopolitan Los Angeles, not sure that goes down like that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
It was interesting to see Peggy level up a bit, and of course her interactions with Jarvis, and a lot less Howard.
Yeah.
It felt kind of weird with a lot less Howard for a little while, but after a while you get used to it, and it's like, oh, okay, well, you know what? You realize you don't need him as much, but when he shows up, he's good.
All right, that's good. So that's fair enough. Yeah, and we'll definitely get into Stark's appearance and disappearance when we catch up with characters. Rob, what about yourself? What were you coming in with, and what did you find yourself after the meal?
I also was a little wary of the move to LA because I also liked the characters there. I thought losing Angie was a big loss. I thought even I felt like she'd be the kind of character who would tag along with her. Like, oh, you're going to LA? That's where I could really become an actress. She's trying to become an actress. I was just like, oh, well, just bring her along, and she'd be kind of like, an added kind of hurdle for Carter to like have to manage of like hide around. Hey, when are you gonna come with me to see the sights and go on auditions or whatever, But once they were there, and once I also saw that they weren't. The first season was great, but I liked the self-contained. They really knew how to do the self-contained one plot in this, where first it looked like we were going to follow like a mystery about this, frozen lady in the lake, and I thought, oh, okay, we're going to start doing procedural stuff again, but it all worked into one long 10-episode arc story that really was really focused. I felt like they were they didn't get distracted much in this season, and every episode played its part well in moving the plot along as they needed to add characters like bring Dottie, and they knew when to do that, and all, when to lose a character and when to bring in, like you said, like Howard Stark. We really didn't need him, but when we did need him, they knew when to bring him in. It was also smart to have characters that were on kind of Howard's level of things, like with Wilkes, so that we didn't just have to have Howard Stark there. And I mean, Dominic Cooper was making Preacher at the time anyway, so just getting him when we got him was good enough too. Plus, it was just brighter. I loved the look of LA. I loved that LA was a point of contention for Carter and Jarvis at first, like they didn't, he didn't want to be there. She wasn't sure about going there, and how she gets introduced to his life, like seeing Jarvis's life, being in Jarvis's world, seeing what life is like as being a Howard's, manservant, getting to see all that extra world. Finally, I warmed up to it pretty fast. Plus, I was actually really excited then to realize Jack Thompson's not coming along for the ride right away. I was kind of, he represented to me the sexist part of the show. And even though it still followed her with characters like that were played by like Vernon Masters, played brilliantly by the excellent, as always, Kurtwood Smith, who can just do no wrong, in my opinion, as a character actor. Adding him to the show was great. There's another actor that's I'm forgetting that they added, the mobster. He's really
Ned
great.
Freddy.
At first I thought he was gonna grate on me, but he actually became great. And then we got Whitney Frost, who is a great villain, and then the return of Dottie, who is always fun. This season really did it. And when it came all to an end, right, and that ending, and we'll talk about it more, it's just that potential we had. And I was looking it up. Yeah, it was like the last episode aired in March of 2016, and they waited till May to let everybody down and watch. Just like I said to you guys, I just finished rewatching 10 and sitting there like floored for watching it for the first time, and since I first watched it, and going, oh my God, they set up so much stuff that we'll never see. Yeah. Well, might never see. And I was so excited. I was like, if there was a third season on right now, oh my God, the sky would have been the limit, But what we got here was a really solid story that improved on many things. A couple of things got worse, but we'll talk about that as we go along.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you all kind of hit it pretty well. I didn't know what to expect personally coming in. I think kind of like Corrie, you didn't know if there was going to be a second season. You're kind of hoping for. I thought that they would stay in New York. The shift to LA. I'm always trepidatious. I mean, and I'm an Angelino, so of course I love when things are in town, because then I can hopefully sneak down and see where they shot and things like that. But also they sometimes fall into tropes. And I think the show really did a good job of skirting the edge of that for the most part, not getting too much into the LA thing, but embracing the change of its environment and how that sort of changes the investigation and the characters you deal with. And so I was pleasantly surprised at how well I think they had pulled that shift off. It was definitely a much more focused season than season one. You're right, Rob. Season one had a kind of shift a couple episodes in. Sometimes it was being comical and sometimes it was being straight, and it seemed like it wasn't totally focused at the very beginning until we got our real main villain show up, so we could get kind of a focused then spycraft there. Here it was much more straightforward. The tone was consistent from beginning to end, and I really appreciated that. And Don, the sanitized racial politics, I think that was a perfect line for it. Because, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. As much as I love Wilkes, it was also like, man, this is a little too blasé, even for LA. I mean, seriously, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, that would be an issue, let alone going back into the 50s. So that was one thing that was kind of, I don't know, a little off. But I think overall, yeah, and especially Whitney Frost. Bringing up a villain of this quality, especially someone who, and we'll get at it, has kind of a real life counterpart to draw off of, which really kind of grounds the character and also is very enlightening to, I think, to people of the capacity and brilliance that people can have inside of a beautiful exterior. I thought was kind of a perfect bring up, especially kind of combining it with the aging actress and how that's going to change her motivations. The only thing that I didn't totally appreciate in some ways, while I love seeing her again, I kind of felt like Dottie was almost a shoehorned in character. Like, she's so great, we got to bring her back. But how do we bring her from the East Coast to the West Coast? And that was the only kind of thing, and which we'll get into in when we talk about the first episode. Kind of that opening scene was a nice way to sort of wrap up Dottie for me. And then just now she was in the corner like, oh, okay, but we're going to have to find some reason to bring her over and bring her in. So while I loved seeing the character, that was when it's like, to me, you guys were right. Bringing the actress roommate, housemate would have been made much more sense to come to Hollywood with her and kind of be a second. Dottie felt a little bit more forced to kind of bring that in the Arena Club, kind of bringing it back around. So outside of that, those were the only things that I think that, again, felt a little forced in its setup. But after that, I totally enjoyed the characters and execution and storyline and the back and forth. And yes, Mrs. Jarvis is just such a treat. Yes, Corey.
I'm just thinking with Angie, I mean, she could have very easily been an inside woman for Peggy in the movie industry. Like, she could have been the one sneaking in to the, change rooms and whatnot and getting information on Whitney Frost and then almost getting caught and like having to, there's so much lost opportunity for her character.
Sure. No, I agree. Though I would also understand, thinking about it, would that lose focus? Would that be one more character to bring in and juggle on top of everyone else? So, again, I don't know whatever the decision makings are and how they go and shift. I know Dottie was certainly a popular enough character. If you're going to bring one person over with, that's kind of the one I think everybody was hoping to see more of.
Yeah. But Anna, I loved meeting Anna and finally getting to see who is this woman that has completely stolen Jarvis's heart. And I love that they introduced that both of them had certain expectations when they met. Mm-hmm. And neither of them met the expectation.
No, I think Anna was a pleasant surprise character. And especially once we meet her, I think she's the perfect match for Jarvis, for Mr. Jarvis. But yeah, it's that sort of freewheeling kind of loving, just understanding, accepting, trusting. That was not who I would have expected to see as the wife of Edwin Jarvis. And yet, God, once she showed up, who else could it have been? And her whole arc within this, I think, was beautiful.
She hugs.
She hugs. She hugs.
She does not hug.
So let's get into our characters here. Well, I mean, yeah, well, let's hold on Jarvis a little bit. Let's start with kind of our big three that move us through this story, which is basically kind of our love triangle, as it were, for our second season. And that is the return of Peggy Carter, Daniel Souza, and our introduction to our physicist, victim, confidant, potential love interest for a moment, maybe, Jason Wilkes. So, Rob, let's kick things off with you. Let's start with Peggy. What do we think about Peggy's return? Now she is obviously much more of a accepted agent. Everyone kind of bows down to her in some ways, outside of Jack. Jack doesn't want to hear any more of it. But the rest of the agency pretty much seeing her as the top agent and willing to fall behind and certainly bet on her interrogation skills. What do you think with how Peggy was dealt with for this season, coming into it and kind of her own little personal arc? I don't know, re-entering into the potential relationship world?
I mean, as far as like what I think of the character alone, I think that she just kept getting better and better. And when we started learning more and more about, things about her past and the threat of learning things from her past and how she handled those things, and just the more confident manner and being in a place where she doesn't have Jack Thompson and all these other people to worry about. She felt more off. She was let off their leash. She was able to just be. And Souza was, he's not the kind of guy who can really rein her in. So she was able to kind of take over a lot of things, even if he wanted to try to take over. She was, she was going out there. She was being sent out there. She was going to do the job. Anybody else be damned. Mm-hmm. And I really, really dug that part of her. And just the thing about the relationship stuff, though, I honestly, that was my big complaint of the season, was the love triangle stuff. I just didn't want it. I didn't like it. And once we found out that Souza was engaged, I just was like, just let her be with Wilkes. I didn't need the other thing. Like Daniel they should have written it like Daniel just moves on, but they never do that. They never, ever do that. I don't know who this is for. It's, I honestly, I don't, I'd like to speculate, but I don't like to be mean about it, so we've talked about this before, or at least I have talked about this before, that I like characters who work with mutual respect. I don't need the will they or won't they all the time. And I feel like if they had just announced that Souza was engaged and she could just move on to Wilkes, and have that be something that carries her on, and, have Daniel still be the character who cares about her. But like, it made me like Daniel less when he was, he meets somebody and he gets engaged and then just throws it, maybe Peggy would have done the same thing if Steve suddenly walked in the room, right? But I don't know. The relationship part of it really fell flat for me. But her character outside of that was just so much more determined. And you get to see it even more determined side of her when Jack came back, came out there, and when Vernon Masters tried to stop her from doing things. She learned enough from season 1 that she was not going to take it from any of these people anymore. Not from the council, not from anybody. She was the Peggy Carter that, that we needed to see after season 1. And all the ways that she was just tough as nails and unafraid of situations that, most people would be afraid of. She just and even when she made mistakes, it was always like she always learned from them, and so I just dug her character a lot more in this. And again, where we would have gone with her in season 3, heading towards building shield, we'll hopefully find out someday.
Yeah. Don, what about you? What was your take on Carter this season? And any thoughts on the whole love triangle thing? Because I'm kind of with Rob on that whole thing of that, like, why are you doing all of this? But
this is why we can't have nice things. Listen, at the end of the day, yeah, they had the forced love triangle. There's the moonlighting kind of thing going on with Souza and Agent Carter. They introduce a guy that has absolutely no shot. Like, even if you're talking about I don't know, what do you call it? Damn it, like I don't know, what was the whole thing that with that they kept on saying about the Last Jedi? As far as expectations are concerned.
Subverting expectations. The constant subversion of expectations.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, like, for one, remember, we've seen Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Remember, Peggy says that Steve saved her husband. So we know that it definitely can't be Wilkes because he wasn't a soldier. Could it have been?
He was in the Marines.
Was he? Wilkes?
Yeah, he said he was in the Marines because she hands him the gun and she's like, "Can you shoot?" He's like, "I was in the Marines." And she's like, "Okay, well."
Yeah. No. I mean, they kind of keep they do in a way kind of keep that like loose, but then again, like, I mean, half of America was in the war. I mean, that's not literally, but
let's put it like this, though. He, it is kind of a known thing throughout the military that Peggy Carter and Steve Rogers were kind of an item, right? That's something that's pretty well known. So if Steve would have rescued Wilkes, that probably would have been one of the first things we would have heard. Like, hey, yeah, I was down in the trenches. I was pinned down by the Jerrys, and in comes Captain America.
Yeah.
So
that would have been part of the story. You're right. That's the first off there.
Yeah. So they it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, come on, he has no chance. Why are we doing this? And then, like I said, for me, I think Peggy was just starting to get her comeuppance that she actually deserved. Mm-hmm. But then Jack Thompson's got to walk in and throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing. But other than that, it was like I said, I think that I like that they gave her a lot more respect in this season, as opposed to, hey, Peggy, I got a great job for you. Follow these. I'm like, oh, come on, man. Yeah, so I did like that aspect of this season.
Okay, excellent. Corrie, your support, your thumbs up for the love triangle aspect. You seem to really be grasping at that one.
Yes. Well, I guess the first sort of moment for me in that second season was what happened between the last episode of season 1 and now that Souza and Peggy are together. Like, the last I saw them, they were making out in his office, and now he's not, he's left. Like, what? Someone needs to fill in those blanks here. What exactly happened?
Well, no. 2 ends with them making out. Season 2 ends. I think this one is season 1 ends where he tries to get her like, "Hey, did you want a drink?" And she's like, "Oh, no, I'm fine. A different time, but not tonight." And that's when she then goes out and pours the vial of blood of Steve's blood out. So they kind of leave it like it's a little out there, but definitely not, oh my God, I must now flee to the coast to get away from the Peggy. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I'm
but-
stepping in on you right here, but yeah, that seemed to be a little of a sudden kind of.
Yeah.
There was sort of a jump in that wasn't really explained.
It was, and I mean, I'm not mad at Souza regarding that, because I think they kind of hinted that it was well known that he was heartbroken over Peggy, so whatever happened definitely upset him, whether or not he'll admit it. And so he took the job option just to get away and try to start a new life. So I'm cool with that. Like, if he's trying to start a new life, he met Violet. Later on, we learned a little bit more of how they met, and you know, how he liked her because she was tough on him when she was doing physio, and you know, he liked her character, he fell in love with her. So I was fine with them being a couple if that was where the story was going. What I didn't like was having Wilkes kind of shoved in there as, here's the necessary male lead that we need for Peggy, because she obviously can't do season 2 without a male lead. She needs a romantic interest, right? Because that's totally what she's about. You know, she's Captain America's girl. She's not this originator of S.H.I.E.L.D. No, she's just the side, like the side gig. So that was a bit frustrating, and I felt like they did Wilkes a disservice. And I know Rob and I talked about this at length when we did our review, but I mean, I didn't like Wilkes as a character. I felt like they were trying to do too much with his character, and then they really didn't finish what they had promised. Like, I mean, I can go into this in depth later on, but I had like a breakdown of, you know, what he was trying to do as a character with Peggy. And then it was basically, if you're trying to connect with Peggy on the fact that you both have the same experience of not being valued in your position, him as being a colored man, her as being a woman in the job force, you know, job area that she is, then you don't continue that conversation by then negating everything she's saying. And there's like a whole bunch of examples. Specifically, I'm thinking of the bar scene, you know, where he asks her something, you want to drink, and then she tells him, oh no, and then he just says, oh, I'll have 2 of those. So he orders for her, he tells her what she's drinking, and he ignores the fact that she's said, I don't want to drink. And then it continues for the rest of the episode where she's like, I don't want to dance, I'm trying to interrogate you. And he's like, come on. So then he manipulates her by saying, well, I'll give you intel if you dance with me. So, I mean, I know I'm being really picky, but
Sure.
It bugged me because it's like, she's told you 5 times, like, the reason she's here is for work. She's not interested in a date. And yet you keep either like circumventing that, or challenging her, or playing word games to get what you want. And it kind of made me feel like this guy's more of a Tony Stark than he is a Steve Rogers.
Look, charming is telling a woman what she wants.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah, no, that's.
Yeah, no. So I felt like, even though they were trying to do some great things with Wilkes' character, they just like nuclear bombed it into the, you know, Middle Ages by how he carried on in these conversations. And I just, the whole time I'm scratching my head going, why is Peggy interested in him? Why is she going along with this? And then when he's supposedly killed, why on earth is she so upset? You know, she only knew him for 2 days. And then they play the Anna Jarvis card. And I'm like, no. You cannot draw a parallel between Anna and Jarvis and Peggy and Wilkes. Like, Peggy wasn't going to be sent to a concentration camp by the Third Reich. Like, we can't do that comparison. It's not the same.
No.
So I was just disappointed with Wilkes' character because I feel like he could have been so much better. They could have done so much more with him. The fact he tries to ask her out the first time they meet with 2 of her superiors standing next at the car, like, well, this is awkward. It's like, I'm pretty sure someone would pull him aside and have a few things to say. If not, he'd be brought down to the station for some interrogation. Like, sure. That wouldn't fly. So, yeah. Well, I wasn't happy. I would have been content with Violet and Souza. I would have been content with Souza realizing, he really does love Peggy, and even though he's trying to get over her by making a new life with Violet, it's not working. And so them parting amicably and him going back to Peggy, that I would have been cool with. But I felt like the Wilkes thing was just, it felt like someone was playing in a fan fiction, and they're like, now kiss.
Oh, no, I think that's a fair note. Rob, did you have something to throw in there?
Yeah, it's just that, for a show that was like, we were lucky to get a second season, and it felt like they just, like when you said like Dottie being shoehorned in, it felt like they were trying, the studio was trying to put things in and see what worked for broad audiences. Like, so we got to start checking some boxes, right? So we need to get this demographic to watch this show. So we need to put this in here. We need this demographic. So there's certain demographic that wants to see love triangles. So we go, okay, we got to do that for them. So it doesn't matter. And we, they try to work it in right, but it just doesn't work. And if, like, especially, and I want to say hi to the chat, by the way, I can't type comments in here. So, hey, everybody. It just doesn't work when you force it. And they keep forcing these kind of storylines into our favorite shows. And it's usually the thing that we complain about the most, is these things where they're trying to make everyone happy. And then you end up, alienating parts of your audience for parts of episodes where people just kind of tune out, and you weaken it. And like Corrie said, that about her character, period, they're trying to make her independent, but make her pick a man. And it's just not her way. Like, she barely picked Steve. Okay. Like their relationship was built on mutual respect, and it didn't necessarily mean it was going to end up as a relationship. It didn't even get to that point. They didn't even get to dance. So really she was, so it's like, she was always her own person. And then here we are, they're trying to make her like, if we would have gotten to see a season 3, right? There was no more, Wilkes had moved on, and Souza, they got that kiss and everything, but at least it looked like they were going in one direction. But they got to stop doing that in the shows just to pull in an audience. The people are going to be there no matter what. This is what people like right now. And
good characters, good storylines. That's what people are going to want regardless. And you're right. I think that was one of the most, I think, frustrating parts of the season, because while we got to see kind of Peggy's arc of getting into her own, taking ownership again of who she is, letting go of the past and stepping forward. I mean, I think we had a good, strong arc for her for the most part over season 1. With this one, even though I like her in the stronger position, the fact that now she is like the number one agent and everybody loves her and respects her, again, outside of Jack, because he's a jerk, was almost kind of a too much. It's like, now you've gone from like nobody really trusts you, so now everyone's behind you. That's a little bit more of an arc into that, like having a lot more respect, but there's still like issues and things that would have felt a little bit better of a transition. And by the same way, relationship wise, now Sousa's gone and he's got a girl and he's going to be engaged. Ooh, complication. And now we've got this charming African-American man who's brilliant, and for some reason she's falling in love with him and she's swooning all through the first episode. Oh, Souza, I'm uncomfortable with you. And Wilkes, no, I don't want to dance, but I need you to tell me what I like. It was such a weird shift for her character, because Peggy is the relationship with Steve was long and creating. It was one out of mutual respect. She wasn't one, even if she's moved on, a man is not the first thing that she is looking for. So I really wish they hadn't done it, because again, it was like, oh, we now have all these people, so there can be complications of the will they, won't they, that we can start again from first season. And just, we didn't need that. That was the one good thing one of the many good things about Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is they did have those relationships based on respect. You didn't have the swoony stuff back and forth. Every relationship was earned. There were no characters fighting over or jockeying position of who's going to like me more. None of that was in there.
Yeah.
And I know they might be trying to ascribe to like more general audiences with the love stories and the Dancing with the Stars tie-in in season 9. We'll get into that later. If you just focus on the good story part and your bad guys and your characters and you establish them, I think that would be most. Unfortunately, I think this is the small little stuff that unfortunately undercut the good stuff that was happening in the season. The great other stuff, the interplay with Peggy and Anna, and I mean Anna's whole little arc from beginning to end was kind of a fabulous little bit. I mean, there were all sorts of these really good, strong character bits, and then you have Wilkes that. Look, okay, I feel like he was just checking a box. His character was there to check a box and to fill in the love triangle and to give us some representation and sort of talk about race, but not really, because we want to move on and we don't want to make it too heavy and alien anyone. And yet he totally understands Peggy and yet will happily betray and then feel really bad about it. Later on, like he was there to move plot points along. Unfortunately, I think more than a really strong character, which, I mean, again, versus Anna or Vernon Masters or God, man, I think Calvin Chadwick had a stronger character arc, really, than Wilkes did, from just like, I believe this is where this guy would go from here to here. So
it's a shame we couldn't remove the love interest part of his character and just have him be like a best friend with Howard Stark and the two of them be sciencing together, and it would be like Fitzsimmons, but like, you know, like that would have been great. Like the two of them.
Even if you wanted to do it, just give it a slower burn.
Yeah.
Don't throw it in so that can be your first, second episode complication. So when he dies, we're supposed to have some feeling or some loss or, oh my God, we could have kissed that one time. You know, the respect level, the fact that this would be someone that could earn her respect, and thus later on when his betrayal would have such a stronger meaning to it, I think is kind of undercutting. But you know, hey, it's 50s, it's Peggy, we got fashion, love, everybody likes to love triangles. That's what plays, right? Really, I think was an unfortunate bit. And again, it made even Souza's whole relationship with his girl. He's like, oh, you kind of ran away and proposed to the first nurse that put you back together. I mean, geez. I mean, how much of a Florence Nightingale like situation can you be having right there? It's. I really wish they didn't waste time with those particular choices, because there was so much other great stuff that was happening with the interplay and characters and the politics. And this is the secret forces that are moving behind, and how do we get our agency to interact? That was all really interesting. The relationship stuff I didn't care about.
We should just introduce Violet to Wilkes, and everything's solved.
And everything is solved right there. Dun, dun, dun.
Perfect.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Any other thoughts on our big trio right there of Souza or Peggy or Wilkes before we move on to the Jarvises?
I liked seeing Souza in the role of Chief. It was neat to see how he operated when he was running his own sort of division.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Jack Thompson always has to undercut him some way.
But that's Jack's whole thing. He's got to be able to flex his manhood in one way or the other. Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, how about the other side of our Peggy duo? Really, forget Souza, forget Wilkes. There's really only one man for Peggy in this series, and that is Mr. Edwin Jarvis, who always a treat. How can you love this character more? You put him in Hollywood and you introduce him to his wife. The frustrations that he has with flamingos.
Yes, Bernard.
Was just awesome. Yeah, I mean that moment where you have kind of like the two New York centric people like, I hate it here. The trees, they don't even look right. It's like grass.
There's no intensity.
Yeah. I mean, there. It was really kind of just. It was so much fun having him back, and just that arc of like, now this is someone that needs this adventure. Thank God, Peggy, for showing up. My life here is boring. I need to do something, and then seeing the dark side of what that adventure life, the actual cost that can carry. I mean, we had a lot going on with Jarvis, and if there was one character that was fun to follow from beginning to end that they could do no wrong with, I think that was Edwin Jarvis here. So, Don, let's start things off with you, with Edwin, and if you wish to include his lovely wife Anna, please do, because it's really hard to separate the two of them in this season.
I mean, yeah, she was basically the backbone of their relationship. So you can't, you can't have one without the other. It's definitely peanut butter and jelly with those two. Yeah, and it was refreshing because, look, for one, when it comes to butlers, we never really ever see their outside life. So to have his home life introduced in here, it helped to round out his character in a way that we've never seen any fictional butler before. Think about it, right? How long have we been following Alfred and Batman, and we know nothing other than the fact that he is Bruce Wayne's manservant? Nothing. Mr. Belvedere.
The secret life of Mr. Belvedere. Oh, the stories.
Jeffrey from the Fresh Prince. Come on, these were just butlers. We knew nothing about their outside lives whatsoever. So to see Edwin's wife, and to see their interplay and how critical she was to his confidence. Because if you noticed in season 1, it's not that he was a bumbling idiot or anything, but he definitely didn't have the swagger that he seems to have picked up since he's gotten married. He seems a lot more self-assured, and like he knows how to move through the world. Whereas in season 1, it's like, oh yes, all right, well, I'm gonna run over here and hide now, and Agent Carter, if you need anything, whistle for me.
Well, I mean, technically, he was still married then. That was still Mrs. Jarvis. But you're right. Without her presence, he is. When she's around with her close and that confidence, it is. She makes him feel like he can do things.
So, yeah, I definitely like that interplay between the two of them. Now I'm trying to remember. Did they say where she is from? Because I don't think she's British.
Hungary,
yeah.
Hungarian. Represent.
So,
all the Hungarians.
I definitely like the interplay between the two of them, and the fact that you have the whole cross-cultural thing in America going on. This is 40s, 50s. You still got large portions of immigrants kind of still coming into the country at that time as well. So, yeah, it's like I said, I like the take that they had on those two, and they were very integral to keeping the story kind of light.
Yeah, excellent. Corey, what's your take on our lovely couple, the Jarvises here?
Well, I have to adore her because we're related, basically.
Wonderful, excellent.
No, I mean, I just loved that we got to see the woman who kind of makes Jarvis the man that he is. Like, who is this person behind him that's supporting him, cheering him on, laughing with him? I love that they had like a very flirtatious relationship. You can tell they really love each other. Like she slaps him on the butt when he goes by, and he tries to leave during one of the conversations, and she's like, "Mr. Jarvis, come back," and then she doesn't just give him a kiss on the cheek.
Oh, it's just a full-on make-out kiss. Yes.
The kiss that and then she thinks it's hilarious about how he reacts and tells Peggy like, "Oh, he's incorrigible." Like he's so easy to tease. He just always falls for me. So I thought that was adorable, and I also love that she's his partner in so many different things. Like he mentions he's been training, and then we find out she's been his sparring partner for 12 months. And then she's like, "Did he catch you with his tortoise of fury move?" So she comes across as very well put together and ladylike, but we also know that she's training with him and taking him down on the mat and just being a partner for whatever he needs someone to go along with, which I loved seeing. And and just I guess it was sad to see where that storyline went at the end of the season. Like, obviously they were thinking of having a family, but I like how they dealt with that, and it kind of gave me similar vibes to like the Black Widow background. But I think they handled it better in season 2 of Agent Carter.
Well, and I think that's nice is because in some ways with that, it gives a hint of why Jarvis may have been so important to young Tony Stark is while Howard may be often caught with his work, as Jarvis could see this as almost his kid or that type of view growing up and what to protect and so on, and why, Jarvis would end up being the AI for Tony Stark. So, I mean, there's kind of subtly, I think they do lay some really interesting connective points right there.
And I also love, just last point is that he risked everything to get her out of Nazi-occupied Germany, right? Like she says something about like, it doesn't take very long to know it's the right person. She says Edwin knew me, what was it, 2 weeks or 3 weeks before he had gone AWOL, stolen a plane, forged documents, and knocked me out of, German occupied country. And being, Hungarian, potentially / gypsy background, Anna would have gone to a concentration camp. So, like he saved her life. And I think, like, what's more romantic than that?
Oh, nothing. Again, it sets their relationship up just beautifully. Rob, what was your take on our Jarvis duo?
Well, I love them as a duo, but James Darcy, he's only like a month younger than me. James Darcy is he does not work enough. Okay, I was checking out his IMDb, and he's been in some stuff and everything, but this could have been. I mean, for me, this is the character that I'll always remember him for, more than I wish that they had somehow been able to use his voice as Jarvis in the MCU proper. In this, we really got to see, and just to kind of expand on what everybody's saying about his character, how he needs this, and at the same time, he's so naive to everything still, with everything that he's seen with Howard, the nonsense that Howard puts him through, the complaining about being out in LA and everything. And hearing the story about how he saved his wife, his future wife. He seemed like a man who would have been like a man of adventure. And instead because of what, like taking care of Tony and everything else. And Peggy was this moment in his life that brought back that person that he could have been.
Sure.
But at the same time, being Tony's manservant for so long and being kind of, him and his wife being so interconnected, he's got that naivete still that when something really serious happens, we see him go through so many emotions. They gave him such a great arc this season because I don't want to, we're going to talk about the episodes later, but I mean, when he goes through what he goes through, it just, his emotional arc just felt so earned.
Oh yeah.
And, just going from the guy that's like plucky to just be around to really active in everything and competent, mostly competent in everything. And just showing like how he could be devoted to everybody differently and still be like every relationship he has, he's completely devoted to, but there's almost like a different Jarvis for each person. And he navigates each relationship perfectly. He's the guy that has to just be like, whenever Howard asks him to do something or puts him through something humiliating, we understand why he acts that way. We might go, man, why don't you tell him off? But he's being what he needs to be for Howard. He's being what he needs for Anna. He's being what he needs for Peggy, and then, you wonder, like, when is Jarvis going to do something for Jarvis? And that's when he gets to do all the adventures, and he gets a little in over his head at times. He gets, bites off more than he can chew. It was such a fantastic arc this year. And also just his continuing relationship and the banter with Peggy as they just get better and better together. Even when they start to fight and bicker about certain things, it just works so well because, again, it's all mutual respect. And
yes,
when Anna was not what I expected at all. At all. And I actually thought that they were going to pull like a Parks and Rec where it's like Jerry's wife is Christy Brinkley. I was expecting like something like that where we were going to like, he's going to have some like way out of his league, like supermodel looking, like somebody that like Howard would have introduced him to. But it just fits so much better to be somebody who you at first think is just a housewife and is so much more than that. And again, that's what a lot of these characters are, is we see you see someone who just looks a certain way and we realize that there's so much more going on underneath. Now, it might not be every character on the show, like some people have mentioned. I think that Wilkes isn't really a very good scientist, and Souza doesn't have that much going on either. But our main three characters here are like with Jarvis and Anna and Howard and Peggy and like Jack. Even Jack has layers. And so when you see Anna and you just see this housewife, and then as further along we go, we realize how capable she is too. And then the way that they interact together is a real partnership. We don't see, everybody's always bickering and fighting, and we don't see, all we know is dysfunction.
Yeah.
And we actually get to see a functioning marriage in something, even with all the difficulties. And we could, somebody could say, well, that's just not realistic. But you know what? There are people that are able to do this. And we actually get a positive marriage on TV, despite everything else. And what it would really be like, what would you really do with something when something goes wrong with that relationship, and how do you deal with things when they go bad. And those were real moments. And we don't, there's characters out there that we have that are in relationships on shows that we like that don't even get to the levels that we saw in just a 10 episode season.
Yeah.
They ran the gamut of emotions in 10 episodes, not even 10 episodes. Let's call it more like 7, right? And we've got shows that run for 15 years that just run through the cliches and the tropes, and all it really is just the same old thing. And with this relationship, we got a real partnership, and it was so refreshing to see.
Yeah, man, I couldn't have said it better. I don't really even know what else I can add on top of that. Yeah, I think it was one of the strongest character arcs, and again the highs, the lows, and what you can see from Jarvis is that kind of insecurity of not knowing what to do to a point when he knows exactly what to do, and there is no pause and there is no hesitation in him. And I think that is another lovely bit that you can see is he's uncertain of his place in the world in so many areas, except with her. I mean, with Howard, he's doing what he is because he's devoted. But what is he doing? How safe it is? Is this the best thing to do? Oh, the complications he's going to have to deal with. That's going to make him a little uncomfortable. Peggy, yeah, here's the fun and excitement. But okay, now I've got to lie on the phone with my Texas accent and try and sound convincing. And though he does a great job with it, you can tell the uncomfortableness with him. When it comes to Anna's arc and fate and connection with her, it's just a beautiful thing. You see how he can operate when he is really in his own drive, and I think that was an awesome bit. All right, well, let's move. Oh yeah, something else.
Side point about Anna. Yeah. She gives Peggy a holster, the garter that's a garter belt that's a holster. Like Peggy's just like, that's the moment where Peggy fell in love with her. She's like, "You are a genius."
Oh. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Anna was a perfect, capable person and didn't have to play it up. I think was it Devante in the chat mentioned that she had to be somebody who wouldn't fall for Howard's charms, and she totally wouldn't. She would laugh Howard to his face, and then go with Edwin because he is pure of heart. It's a perfect balance there. All right. Well, let's move on. We're going to start heading into our big villain stuff. But before we do that, I think it's the time to sort of mention Jack Thompson, since he is our kind of bridge. I mean, look, he's a company guy. Ultimately, he's got their back, but he doesn't mind letting there be questions in the air until that's really decided. Look, Jack, I like what they did with Jack on this one, I have to say. I love that he is the political beast looking to find out. He's looking for number one. Yeah. But ultimately, he still has a spine in there. He still has a line that he won't cross, even though he wants to pretend that he is constantly the guy in charge. He obviously makes an error sending Peggy off into LA to try and get away from this whole business that actually ends up coming right back in, which is the one loop that sort of annoys me. But I do love his kind of bit. I love the fact that we question what his true motivation and purpose is constantly throughout the season. But that when it comes down to a pinch, there are lines that he won't cross. I really did enjoy that. So Rob, thoughts on Jack Thompson and his whole little arc here? We don't have to spend too much time, but anything in particular?
Yeah, no, it just, and I won't talk about the whole thing. But I will say that, like, he, as much as I already know where his character's like, what to expect from this character, right? He was a much more interesting character this season, especially especially where it all goes. But like setting it up, I was used to things, but he felt like more like he just really wanted Peggy to just kind of not completely fall in line. He wants things to be his own way, but in the end, I think he wants the best for the country. I think he really wants to do a good job. I don't think he wants to just be this guy all the time. And especially with what she knows about him and everything, he knows that he can't play her. He knows he can't fake it with her. He can't try to, to BS her. She sees right through him. And so like getting rid of her, I thought was I thought it was true to his character, because if he was going to be who he's going to be, he can't really have her around.
Yeah.
He needs her gone. And even though it's just the story drags him back, that he would have rather just stayed in New York and just kept doing what he was doing. But he, there's still the guy there. And when you bring in, that's why I think like with Vernon Masters, right, bringing him in to be that reason that Jack has to, acts the way he does again. Mm-hmm. They used a really good character to make him be the old Jack a little bit and make us question him. He's that character for, again, this season. We don't know where his loyalties are going to fully lie. And I think you really need that kind of character in this. You need more, if you're going to have drama, right? Instead of the mm-hmm. fake drama, which is like the love triangle, you need the guy that you don't know if or when he's going to stab you in the back. But again, it's hard to talk about him without getting into the end part of it. So I'll just say that like they did a lot better with him. He was a lot more palatable to me this season than last season, because he was growing. And the last times I've talked about him have been always very negative. But I'm glad that I started to like change my mind, even though he's still, he still says some things that he shouldn't say and everything. But
he does get to represent that kind of interesting other side of, while Peggy gets to do the kind of adventure and intrigue and find the spies and do that, he has to deal with all the political machinations on the upper levels that allows her to do her job or interfere with her job. And it was kind of interesting to have him with that interplay again with Vernon Masters there, sort of working those things out, giving us a shot of where are these complications coming from, and is he helping or hurting? And that's where I love the back and forth there. Don, do you have any thoughts there on our Jack Thompson?
So Jack Thompson. Listen, he unfortunately, like he still, even though he knows he basically owes his career to Agent Carter, instead of showing her the proper respect, is, again, like, oh, yeah, well, I'm Jack Thompson. I give the orders around here. The only reason why you got to come out here is because I signed off on it. Yeah. It's just like, dude, seriously, you're lucky that anyone in that office has any kind of respect for you after it was, after everyone pretty much knows that it was Carter that saved your ass when you froze, when you guys were out with the Howling Commandos. All right. So, it's one of those things where seeing him come back, I loved when she basically put him in his place when he comes in the office. It's like, yeah, listen, you know what? You're talking about cleaning up my messes. No. Only thing that happens is I save you and somehow you get a medal for it. I'm like,
that was brutal.
Yeah, look on his face like you weren't supposed to remember that. You weren't supposed to say that to me, Jack Thompson. You know, so yeah, man, it's one of those things where he looks kind of stressed out to a certain degree as well. Like he didn't look like he was really handling being chief all that well. I mean, he's coming in with the 5 o'clock shadow. Remember, season one, he was a lot more, clean shaven and fresh faced, and now here he's, like I said, he's got the 5 o'clock shadow going on, and I don't know, did he look like he's got a tan since he come to LA, but yeah, he didn't seem comfortable at all. And it was kind of like him throwing his weight around was like his way of trying to show like, no, I can do this. But it's like, come on, man. Souza and Carter can see right through you. You are even more transparent than Wilkes when he's disappearing. All right. So, yeah, I was seeing, the whole him trying to turn a corner, and you see where that got him. But obviously, in the first grouping of episodes, he's back to being, Jackass Thompson, and for that, I'm like, hey, you know what? He deserved a swift kick in the pants, and yeah, unfortunately, we won't get to see the conclusion of that, and that's the only sad part about Jack Thompson's story.
Yeah. Well, Jack definitely enjoyed being in charge. I think that's what Jack really wanted to be, in charge. In charge of what? Or the work-wise, I don't think was so important about him. In LA, he just wanted to go back to New York was he was in charge. And when he's around, he just wants you all to be sure that he's in charge, which of course why Peggy doesn't bow down to him at all and likes poking fun at him that way. Corrie, yourself, what's your take on Jack?
Oh, yes. I agree with the previous point about how he was throwing his weight around. I think to me that just reads as him being not confident and uncertain. And so he's like a male peacock. He's fluffing out his feathers to try to be like, I belong here. I'm important, to sort of using that as a way to indicate authority. But really, the people that have that kind of authority don't have to announce they have it. They just naturally have it when they show up and walk in the room. I liked the little argument they had in the office where Peggy calls him a coward because he won't do anything. He's sort of sidestepping all of the issues, and she says, "You're doing what you always do, burying an ugly truth and hoping someone will pin a medal on you." And it was just like, ooh, I mean, yes, but ooh, that's true.
Peggy knows how to cut deep on Jack.
Well, she knows what his insecurities are, and she brings those to light and basically says, hey, here's where you're not pulling rank as well as you should be. And you see that reflected a lot in all of the conversations that Jack has with Souza, which is every time he's around Souza, he has to, through either comedy or comparison, show Souza that he's doing a better job as chief back in his area at his office, which isn't really true. And then I noticed, like, Jack, he's like the little brother that always shows up when you don't want them to show up and is always going through your things. Like, Jack was opening up a file and then the camera pans, Souza was opening a file and the camera pans and Jack just, yoink, like
Yeah.
with the pencil in Whitney Frost when she was a little kid, right? What's this you're looking at, huh? And just so annoying. Like, if I was Souza, I would have punched him by now.
Yeah. Well, he has a very punchable face. So
yeah, he always he has to have his nose in everything. He has to figure out what everybody's doing. You know, he's like a helicopter mom. He just wants to know. And it's not really his business. So
yeah, for sure. All right, so that is of course our Jack Thompson, and our perfect transition into our, let's just say, a couple of main villains here. The first one, really the headliner of the season, the purveyor of Zero Matter herself, Whitney Frost, who, God, was such a high point in this season, not only just from a character standpoint, and yes, as a female heroine, as a female hero. See, saying heroine always makes me think of drugs. I'm just gonna have to go the gender neutral hero. With Peggy, you almost always have to have then a female villain counterpart. And they really made a wonderful choice with this, with Frost, specifically because Frost really has a real life counterpart. For those who may not be aware, a lot of Frost's genius and position is all based on Hedy Lamarr, often called the most beautiful woman in cinema back in her day. Hedy Lamarr, not only a mainline Hollywood actress, but also the inventor of Wi-Fi. Or more to the point, the inventor of signal hopping, which was used she developed during World War II and was used in torpedoes and allowing them their navigation and stuff like that. So a lot of the basis of the jumping of frequencies, signal hopping, became the basis of what Wi-Fi is. So we're talking not only a beautiful actress, but a brilliant inventor as well. So if you want to take somebody and create a perfect counterpart in Hollywood for Agent Carter, you couldn't base it off of anyone better. And Whitney Frost, again, playing not only a beautiful actress, but you get the add-on of the little bit in her years, maybe in the changing of times, adds that motivation to her, that lack of respect who we get to see constantly from Peggy to Wilkes to Whitney herself. And really a nice slow burn through the first half of the season until we find out who the actual dangerous person that we got to look out for is. It was a wonderful first opening the season to introduce Whitney to us. Corrie, why don't you lead us off in our discussion of our villain of the season and your take on Whitney Frost?
Yes. Wow. So much to say about her. I think she was the perfect counterpoint to Peggy. We got to see a bit of her childhood growing up, and they had a similar story in the sense they never felt valued or important, and they weren't, their interests weren't valued. But I think Whitney had the harder childhood growing up because she was in a bit of a, not necessarily abusive home, but not necessarily a safe home.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of security there. It looked like it was a single mom family, and the mother was trying to keep the house together and keep the income by having male suitors on the side. Excuse me, sorry. And so we see that, she doesn't really have a positive relationship with men from a young age. And we see this sort of message being drummed into her that it doesn't matter how smart you are, and nobody cares about your brains. All they care about is what you look like. And if you are smart, her mom tells her, you would focus on this. If you're half as smart as you think you are, you'll focus on this instead of what's in your head. We learned that she had applied to a university for a science program and didn't get accepted. And then she had that rubbed in her face by her mother, saying, did you honestly think they'd take a girl? So we have kind of a very traumatic, difficult childhood for her. And we see that line of, you look a lot prettier if you smiled, being used on her. The first time it's said by her Uncle Bud, who isn't her uncle. He's just the person who's sleeping with her mom at the time.
No.
And then we have the scout that says the same thing to her outside the movie theater. I bet you look real pretty if you smiled, which has a whole other connotation associated with it, meaning, you're only valuable for how you look. We only value you by your physical appearance as a woman.
Hey, that was the whole thing brought up with even Captain Marvel and Brie Larson. Why isn't she smiling more? And her, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah. I mean, it's true. You do look better when you smile because you look like you're happy as opposed to like depressed or wanting to kill someone. Like if you have Clint Barton's resting face, you always look like you're ready to kill someone.
Sure, but who's telling Clint he should smile more?
Yeah, no one's telling Clint
Nobody.
that. They get an arrow in the kneecap if they do that. Nobody would know. Yeah, so we do have like a very traumatic past with her, and I think what makes her, or at least what I respected about her character, is that she takes that message of, you look real pretty if you smile, and uses it essentially to get into Hollywood. She's like, okay, I'll play the game. I know how this game works. I'll play the game of chess and I'll win the game using my looks. But in the background, I'm this genius scientist who's also creating things and inventing things. And, the sad thing is, what could she have been had she had the support network that Peggy had? If she had a brother like Michael who was like, hey, you've just let everybody drum these ideas out of you. This isn't you. This isn't what you want. You've always wanted adventure. Pursue your adventure.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't have someone there telling her that. And we see that a lot with how her character reacts to things, that she doesn't really even let her own husband see the real her. She's always has a mask up, not a mask.
Yeah,
she always has a mask up. She's always acting, and we see how good an actress she is, and how she has her husband just, wound around her finger. Like, it's clear to, all of us watching that she's just pretending to cry, and she complains about Peggy, and she's like, "I'm so afraid she frightens me. She's gonna hurt you." She's, call Mr. Hunt and make him deal with it, and then just nothing after that end of scene, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit disconcerting how like emotionally manipulative she can be and how emotionally disconnected she is. Like she's basically just constantly acting a part.
Sure. Exactly.
Yeah, so that was my take on her. But,
okay, excellent. Rob, what was your take there on Whitney Frost?
Well, Win Everett really came out of nowhere for me on this. You know what I mean? Like she's one of those actresses that, like a lot of character actors, you go, I know I've seen them in something. I not really was that familiar with her as an actress. So she really came out of nowhere for me and nailed it, because the whole thing with Hollywood and the, you're only as, you got like a shelf life. And I mean, she's, they're calling her aged, and was like stunning. And that was the other thing is, I if I had one complaint about her character is that she was still way too pretty for them to be calling her like old, like that she was an aging star. But it's whatever. But the fact that she just played the game, like learned from everything, all the negative things that she was told. She did all the things that everybody told her to do, and then just secretly did everything else. Because even with her husband, right? I don't even know how legitimate she even felt that marriage was. Do you know what I mean? It felt like the marriage was just another step to where she needed to go.
Yep.
Like the acting didn't just stop, didn't just stop when they said cut in a movie. She was acting for everything.
Yeah.
For everyone. And to me, it just like the way she was able to do what she does later with her husband, to me just said he was just another means to an end. And that she could pretend, maybe she acted so well that she could sometimes believe the lie that she loved him. Like that's how good of an actress I am, as I really, she's, doing what she has to do. But also I compare her to, like, when we say like she's the perfect counterpoint, she reminds me a little bit of Victor Von Doom. In that he's this very smart, intelligent inventor. He's got these great big dreams, and he starts out like when you first, are introduced to this character way back when, he's just a guy going, learning in college, and forget about the Latveria stuff and everything. But when she goes down really into, when we finally realize who she is, like she's not just this wife of a senator actress and somehow, involved in this scheme somehow, when we realize that she's the brains and she really feels like this is her destiny and she is owed this. And when she wants it, it's hers. That's very Von Doom. That is like, it is birthright. It is what I've earned. And that level of like, when she gets to that point, when she finally lifts the veil on herself and who she really is such a great turn I put her in the same level as a Von Doom. Except for TV, she's a supervillain, but she's, she's just looks like a regular person. Not all, not all villains have to look like, have armor and, be flashy or have extra arms or whatever. It's the people that look like everybody else and just hiding, again, talking about the layers of the character and how she brought all of that and how she could turn it on and off at any given time, and just so manipulative and just, everything, just she wanted to make everybody think that she was playing, just she was their pawn and she could be pulled any which way that they wanted, when really, and this was before she got Zero Matter, and it's just such a fine acting job. Wynn Everett, again, is another person that needs to get more big roles like this, because it just was such a fantastic villain role. Because again, like to add on to what Corrie was saying, and her background, how, when we realize how smart this person is, it just starts to, everything just starts to, all the light bulbs start to go off of how great this character's layers are. And it's just fantastic. Just so fantastic. I can't say enough good things about this character.
Excellent. Yeah, Corrie?
I had one more thing I forgot that I wanted to mention. I love the line where she's talking about, like, maybe the one time she lets people see her is when she has a conversation with Chadwick and she asks him about retiring, because she's thinking about the Zero Matter and research and science. And you realize how on totally different playing fields they are, because his first response is, "Oh, of course, darling, first he asks about, you're not going to retire when I'm running for Senate, because that'll overshadow." So she has to wait till after he's gotten into Senate. Yeah. And then he says, "You can retire and have all the babies you want." And I'm like, because of course that's the only thing she would want, because he clearly has no idea who his wife is. Go ahead.
Yeah, it does perfectly just sort of like establish their kind of lack of connection in so many ways.
Yeah. And all she wants is to do her research and leave that Hollywood life, and her birth name was Agnes Currie. So.
Okay. Don, what's your take there on the adventures of Whitney Frost?
So, look, I loved the flashbacks for one, to show that this is someone who was interested in science growing up, and she was tinkering, and it seems like she grew up kind of in Depression era America, because we get the whole thing with her mom, having Uncle Bud, and she's like, "Look, I'm not an idiot, all right? I know he's not my uncle, and on top of that, I don't like him, And we see the progress, like from whatever it was she was doing with the first radio to her as a teenager, with her schematics of, whatever invention that was supposed to be that she was dreaming up, and her mom is just like, look, yeah, you applied to college, yeah, you got accepted, but that doesn't mean a damn thing. Means nothing at all. It's like, yeah, you can be as smart as you want, but the thing that people are going to really value you for is being pretty. And when she gets to Hollywood, that is reinforced. And it's even, to the point where when that agent is like, hey, what's your name? And she tells him, he's like, yeah, no, we're going to have to do away with that because, that's not, Agnes is not a pretty woman's name, So, yeah, it's just one of those things where just like, oh, man. Like her going, excuse me, her going through like the I guess trauma of childhood and her intellect being pushed to the background by society was one of those things that she's like, all right, well, you know what, fuck it, I'm making everybody pay for that. you know and it's one of those things where when you see a lot of villains, you know like especially the mustache twirly ones, it's like, okay, do you really have a reason to be this evil? But for her, it wasn't even evil thing so much as it was, I'm in a world where power is being denied me because of the fact that I'm a woman, and they just, want me to shut up and look pretty, or if you can recite these lines, then we'll make you a star. And, on the flip side of it, it's like, no, I have so much more to offer. And if the only way I can show you what I have to offer is by doing some of the most extreme things possible, then that's what it's going to be. The ends will justify the means at that point. So it's just one of those things where I'm like, oh man, like the fact that no one knew about any of this stuff. She, steps up to Wilson's like, yeah, give me the zero matter. I know what to do with it, and you don't. I know more, because she's known as an actress. I'm a starlet. I pose. I look pretty. I smile, and I say lines off pieces of paper into a camera. And her husband had no idea because, again, he's a social climber. He's got his connections with his all gentlemen's club. He's like, okay, well, yeah, no, I'm here in Hollywood. I need to keep up appearances as well. Oh, you know what? Yeah, I have this famous actress who is going to be my wife. So, all right, awesome. And because of that, they discounted, who she really was and what she brought to the table. And by the time, they realized, by the time the people around her realized who she really was and what she was capable of, too late. So, they kind of got what they deserved.
Well, it is the kind of, recurrent theme of more than meets the eye. There was Peggy, whole first season is she's a female agent, the most capable one, but because she's females, no one respects her. We have Wilkes, who is a brilliant physicist, but because of the color of his skin, then he can't be respected, and therefore, he can't manifest those things. We have Whitney, obviously, both a woman and where she grew up, not having the type of maybe support that someone like Peggy would have had. And where does that genius then go, and how does that get manifested? Again, more than meets the eye and not respected. Even, and I'll use this as our transition into talking about the first couple episodes, Dottie sharing a lot of these recurrent themes in the sense of her childhood also being a traumatic one, not being respected. Sure, she's more tortured than, say, Whitney was, but Whitney had a lack of support in an entirely different way. How each of these, maybe from their level of support to their guidance, whether that is good or nefarious, really does shape the direction where a lot of these characters end up going. And I think that it is kind of the fun interplay that they do in sculpting these characters. They did get to sort of play with. Who are the ones that could be discounted and have so much more to add in? Who are the ones that maybe in their childhood had different levels of support, lack of support, direction, good or bad? And how does that play out? What is the nature and nurture kind of combination of things? And I think that was one thing that they did, I think, really well this season, seeing these different directions. But yeah, let's jump into Dottie, and through this, let's jump into episode 1. We've been talking for a little while, and I know we wanted to try and catch a couple of these episodes before we move on, take our break for part 2 next week. But I think Dottie is kind of that perfect transition, because obviously a big antagonist for Peggy last season, and does get to be our opening bit for this season, with a nice little twist of our expecting of Peggy and having it be Dottie. And then we kind of get the final capture, since Dottie managed to escape last season, which sort of kicks things off. So I'm going to sort of open this up as people want to sort of jump into. What do we think? Was this the perfect way to kind of bring Dottie in? Should we have saved that? Did we like how this season opened up, and sort of how we pulled into the discovery of the frozen lady in the lake and Peggy's eventual kickoff to LA? Who wants to start off things?
Sure.
I'll start. It's I actually thought that, like you said earlier, it was a kind of almost an end to season 1, like a real farewell to season 1, by having this happen here and being like putting the main question at the end. The main character that I think they needed to resolve from season 1 was her still out there, and we go, look, we're taking care of this. We're taking her down. We're putting her away, so we can move on to other things. But the way they did it in such a great action way, also showing like how they were letting Peggy handle this, and not rushing the place and letting her take her down herself, and being like a great subversion of it. You think it's her, and turns out that it's Dottie. Was really great way to start it, and then transition into this mystery that we were going to be following, that starts out so small as just this weird little kind of supernatural-esque case of a frozen person in a lake. I thought they did a really great job of that, of just saying, this is goodbye to season 1 in New York and what and here's LA, and a frozen lake. And it just, I thought it was a really good transition.
Right on, right on. Yeah, Corrie?
I loved that slow-mo scene where she hits her in the back of the head with the bag of coins.
Oh yeah, that was really cool.
Blow it in the background. I'm like, oh, that's so good. And the fight scene, I mean, I wasn't expecting Peggy to be in the bank vault. That was a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect all of the tellers to be SSR agents in disguise. That was like, what? It went from being, oh no, it's a bank hold up. Oh no, Dottie's really taken them for all their worth, all their money, pun intended, to, oh wow, this is a sting operation. Cool. I didn't see that coming. And then we just go right into this great fight scene between Peggy and Dottie, and I just want to know, who's the stunt double on these, and how many hours did they do practicing that scene? So it was a great, blast open the second season, all guns blazing, which I loved. And yeah, they even threw in that line that was from first season where Peggy says, "Oh, love the hat," right when she asks Dottie. So these little kind of nuanced, tip of the hat, pardon the pun.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. And Woman in the Lake, I liked that it gave us a sort of like unique mystery that we haven't come across yet. And I also love that it gave Peggy the opportunity to look at things differently. Everybody's wondering, like, why is this woman in the lake? And she was the only one that said, well, first thing we need to do is figure out if the woman in the lake and the frozen lake are even connected. So I like that they, gave her that line to show that she's not looking at everything the same way, the police are.
Nice. Excellent. Yeah. Don, what about yourself? What was your take on our kind of opening bit here with Dottie, the bank heist, and then moving on to our LA mystery?
Yeah, so obviously subversion of expectations with we finding out that it was Dottie who was wearing the red hat as opposed to Agent Carter, and doing the bank heist, and them, actually being a step ahead of her for once, but she went down swinging. She wasn't just like, okay, you got me. It was like, nope. If you're gonna get me, this is gonna be a brawl. So
right.
You gotta respect that she's still about her business, no matter what day or time it is, no matter what the situation is, red room. She's gonna be a fighter. The whole transition to LA, obviously was like, oh, okay, this is different, had a way different aesthetic. It wasn't the kind of, I guess, drabby grays of the concrete jungle. Now it's palm trees and no skyscrapers or anything. Nice open sunshine and beaches and all that stuff. A much different kind of vibe. And and then we get the whole thing with like, oh, this is Los Angeles, where it does not snow. How is there a frozen lake? Where does the frozen lake come from in a place that has, no less than, maybe 50-degree weather?
Yeah. Not a lot of freezing here in LA. I'm going to tell you that as a lifelong resident, very little.
Yeah. So, obviously that set the tone for what we were about to get into, and I personally, I like it a lot as far as an intro goes.
Yeah, well, I thought that was kind of a nice bit. It was a good bridge. in that sense. I think, Corrie, you're right. Is Dottie was kind of the left open question there. Is she going to be captured? Getting that out of the way first off, showing it gives a chance to show where Peggy is in the SSR, her respect from the agents, even when they go into the whole interrogation bit afterwards, and they're just like taking bets with how long it's going to take for Peggy to break her. I mean, there was a lot of, it was a kind of a nice setup in that sense. The fact that it's Jack playing the political game and not wanting to be showed up too much by Peggy, getting that excuse from Souza to move her off, I thought was a good move, and it was a great bit from Jack from a character standpoint, and that they could establish this mystery and basically wrap it up within the hour, I think was a good way to get things moving, but allow that there is a larger mystery here. I think it set the pace up really well. Plus, of course, we had to introduce all of our side characters, which we've already talked a whole lot about, so won't get too much into that. But Devante here in the chat brings up an interesting point with Dottie. Dottie should have showed up trying to infiltrate the club in California. They could have been reluctant partners, so it was nice seeing her beat up Jack in the interrogation room, which it was. I love Peggy wouldn't have done that. You amateur. I mean, it was a nice way of setting up the levels of where people were. But I have to say, this was my one kind of critique in the opening, because Dottie was going to get an Arena Club pin, and the Arena Club is the eventual connection we get back in LA. That was the reach I didn't really like. If it was just copying Dottie for something else and there was some other connection, and I mean, that was just too close. Or like I said, like Devante had mentioned, if they save Dottie to a discovery in the club, in what, episode 3 or there were or 4 when Peggy goes into the club, that might have been kind of an interesting way of bringing the two of those, I think, in a more I don't know, in a way that made a little more sense. That didn't seem quite so jarring, didn't seem quite so messed up. This the fact that she was going for Arena Pin in New York, and that happens to was behind the frozen woman in the lake with the Arena Club there. That was the only bit that I thought was a little forced. Other than that, like I said, I love seeing Dottie, and she gets used very well throughout the season. But this is where we get to meet Wilkes. This is where we get our setup, our love interest, and that sort of, once they discover that our dead body was killed by the policeman, who ends up dying himself because of exposure to the dark matter, that starts to open things up into our wider bits, where we get into episode 2 with the whole Wilkes and Peggy conversation and our discovery of what's going on a bit more in the lab. So what do we think about let's see, I look at my notes to find the title of the episode. Oh, that's right. A View in the Dark. Of course, that makes so much sense. Thoughts on A View to the Dark? This is where we get Wilkes playing a little bit more, and of course, our discovery of the dark matter and our final death of Wilkes, in quotation marks, at the end.
We still have police and other guys being jerks and calling Peggy. The detective they're supposed to be working with calls her sweetheart. He's like, "Listen, sweetheart, I don't know how it works where you're from, but where we're from." Are you kidding me? Really?
Gotta have the misogyny. Wouldn't be in a world without misogyny.
And then episode 2, somebody calls her darling again. Yeah. So anyway, it's yeah. So somebody on the council calls her darling. But I mean, I think we already talked about Jarvis learning judo.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked that. I loved Peggy's response to it. Good Lord, man! Because he's trying to lift that huge weight.
That outfit. Oh no, that just put that outfit in my head again. I gotta wipe my mind off of that. There was, yeah.
I liked the like historical drops that they did. So they talk about the Dunbar Hotel, and Souza mentions that he went to see Ella Fitzgerald perform with Violet. So that was really neat. And we learned that like the Dunbar Hotel is a hopping place for the colored crowd, as he puts it.
Sure.
So that was interesting. I did find it a little bit, I don't know, not believable that Peggy would just show up at the Dunbar to meet with Wilkes. Like,
well, she's charmed by him. Didn't you see? She was all like googly-eyed. So that's charming. That's how you know.
Okay, that's yeah, and then we had the whole thing with Souza and the engagement ring.
Right.
I don't know. I felt that I have in my notes that I felt it was very rushed. The whole engagement ring thing and Peggy and Wilkes, and it just seemed very rushed and not needed in that episode. I would have liked more time actually dealing with the mystery.
Well, yeah, because we've got the Council of Nine is introduced in this stuff right now. You know, we find out about the dark matter, you know, I guess that's Wilkes' whole discussion talking about as part of the Manhattan Project and where that it came from. So you've got a lot of lore and setup, the relationship complication, you know, on top of that. Well, I mean, I guess we've already made our minds pretty well known of the necessity of that. But yeah, there was a lot more setup in the description of it. Our Council of Nine, their decisions of what they're going to do with the dark matter, the zero matter, and then obviously trying to convince Wilkes to go in and break into his lab. I mean, that's already kind of a full episode.
Yeah, although I did like the scene where Souza can't find Peggy. He doesn't know where she is. There's bullet casings around the car, and then he has that sort of fit in his office. And Rose, she's like, I think Jarvis says something about, you know, I think Souza Chief's having a bit of a, you know, whatever. He seems upset or worried, and her response is, well, Chief has a special kind of worry for Peg.
Sure, of course.
Cute line. So.
All right, Rob, Don, do you guys have any thoughts on this? Again, I know a lot of this has the setup on relationship, which we've kind of already gone in. We haven't talked too much on Council of Nine, but I think we're going to do a lot of our side characters for next week. So, but any kind of like main thoughts on how this moved, how you felt pacing wise on this episode?
Well, we pretty much talked about this episode just by talking about the characters.
Yeah.
You know, like, yes, we did get the return of Ray Weiss in this episode, who again, just they keep getting some of the best character actors on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Agent Carter. And Ray Weiss, you know, Leland Palmer himself is just fantastic. He's one of those guys who just is, you can always tell he's having a good time doing it. And that brings so much, you know, energy that you get really into it. You know, like, these are just a bunch of jerks. They're a bunch of scumbags, but they are some of the more watchable scumbags when they're having fun doing it. You know, when they're enjoying themselves, we enjoy watching them enjoy themselves. We enjoy hating them. And so that's the parts of this that I'll talk. That's something that contribute to this episode is the fun and interesting character actors that they bring in for these kind of, you know, like just small roles.
Well, yeah. What
also
he had
the logo in the Gentleman's Club. That's something that's important for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. later on. That's the logo in the Gentleman's Club is like the symbol for in the third season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, and that would make sense to have that kind of link, as it was right in the middle there.
It's for the space program, right? That all the NASA astronauts signed up for when they went through the portal. It's the same V.
Is it the Pathfinder program or the not Pathfinder, because that's the
One thing I noted in the window, the stained glass window, where Jarvis and Howard are working on the recreating whatever that serum spray stuff is to bring Dr. Wilkes back.
Right.
The window looks like an arc reactor.
That's nice. See, these are fun little design stuff that's good to throw in. I mean, that's what kind of makes a lot of these rewatches, I think, really enjoyable, is how much of the small details you get to sort of pick up as things go on.
I snapped a photo, so I was like, aha, it's an arc reactor. Anyway, sorry. Continue, Rob. Oh, you done?
Oh, yeah. We were just talking about, I love perfect Twin Peaks reference, of course, as the elder Palmer father, Ray Wise I think that was one of the first things that I saw him in, and has been creepy and weird ever since. I always love seeing him. And next week, he's actually in one of my favorite tiny little scenes, which we'll talk about. Okay, so episode 3 is Better Angels. This is, of course, the fallout, as you can see, of Wilkes's apparently being killed, of what happened with Whitney Frost, the disappearance of the dark matter, or the zero matter. I keep wanting to say dark matter. That's dark force. Zero matter is really kind of the blend there. So yeah, and of course, more under the we get a little bit more of our arena club and the appearance of Howard Stark helping out with that. Now, look, it's always fun seeing Dominic Cooper. I know we didn't talk too much about Stark in the opening bit, but he's kind of, like we said, a side character almost in this season. But God, he was always so much fun to have. I mean, I think just having him show up makes everything kind of worthwhile, I think, for this episode. Though the arena club and the infiltration and all of that stuff, of course.
Code Pink. Code Pink. There's women. Quick. Code Pink.
Oh, yeah. That is awesome. I mean, yeah, if you really want to make a bunch of old men uncomfortable, that is the way to do it.
They didn't look that uncomfortable. I mean, there was the one guy that was asleep under his newspaper. The next scene, he's like chatting up with the lady in the short little skirt and the hair. He seemed happy.
they may be up for some rule changes in the near future. Don, what did you think on Better Angels, our return of Howard Stark and our infiltration into the arena club?
You know what? Your club sucks, and I'm never coming back here again. Oh my God, that was absolutely, yeah. I mean, listen, you get first the introduction, right, where he's like, "You're in the shot."
Yes.
A little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Still in the shot. Like, you know what? All right, fine. And yeah, we're taking lunch. Yeah, like, yeah, man. Because yes, Howard Stark is based off of Howard Hughes, right?
Yes.
And Howard Hughes was known for directing movies as well, so makes perfect sense that they have Howard dipping into the Hollywood scene on that level. And then when they finally infiltrate the club, or at least try to, he's like, okay, well, how can I possibly finesse this whole thing to make it easy for us to get in? And he's just like, all right, you know what, I'm going to use the thing that I'm known for. Howard Stark is known for having an abundance of women around him. And so it's like, okay, hey, I'll bring an abundance of women into a place that says no women. Because for him, he's like, yeah, we've been trying to recruit me for a decade to go to this place where the one reason why I even get out of bed and leave my mansion in the morning, other than making money, the only reason why I go out is because there's an abundance of women. You want to lock me into a club with nothing but a bunch of men? Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Release the secretaries.
Yeah, so you gotta give it to Howard for the fact that he was like, okay, well, yes, I found a way to use my reputation for being a philanderer and a ladies' man to help this whole ruse come about. So I like that a lot. That was pretty funny.
Yeah. No, that was definitely when the show likes to have fun. They definitely know a way to do that. And of course, this is also when we have our discovery of Wilkes not being dead, and
He's a communist apparently,
and a communist. He's
Yeah.
not dead, but he is a communist now because that was the easiest way to pin anything on anyone back in the day. Is you just call them a communist. I did love the fact that how they were able to see Wilkes is how Howard thought that he was going to take over Hollywood. I'll just capture more light and more wavelengths, and I'll be able to show like more of a film. That is such an engineer way of approaching a creative problem. I really appreciated that. Of course, it does allow them to see Wilkes, and that's kind of a nice, handy little bit. But I do love that kind of engineer approach to maximizing Hollywood. It's about light. Well, I'll give you all the light.
I just love the humor. Like that line where Peggy's asking Jarvis how long before Howard shows up, and he's like, "Well, he's with the location scout. It depends how long it takes the location scout to him to scout her locations." And Peggy's like, "Why did I ask?"
Yeah. No, it's really that's when you should just not be saying anything there.
And then I also love the meta narrative, how they don't take themselves quite that seriously. It was very tongue-in-cheek, some of the dialogue. Like Howard's running this film studio and he offers Peggy a role because one of the actresses called in because she was too drunk. So he's telling her, you can be this sassy bar wench. Mm-hmm. And Peggy says, "I'd rather be a cowboy." And he replies, "I don't think the audience is ready for that." And then she says, "Oh, but they're ready for a movie based on a comic book."
Oh, yeah, they get to have, they've always had their fun.
And it's just, wow. And then he says he'll be able to write it off because it's a historical text, technically. It's a comic book based on a real person. Well,
technically, that's the Kid Colt, is that?
Yeah, Kid Colt.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Silva in the chat here was making sure that we all know that this was Kid Colt's MCU debut. Good call there, Silva. Perfect. He also thought that Stark might be well known in Madripoor. I'd believe that. Yeah, Rob?
I just have a couple of things from this episode. One is for Howard when he doesn't remember who Daddy is, even though Jarvis is like, "She had a gun on you, man." And he still doesn't remember. So it's basically saying, how often does Howard Stark get a gun pulled on him by women?
Yeah.
That he can't remember how many times a woman has put a gun in his face. Yeah.
Or he just doesn't pay attention to this part.
And the realization of like for Whitney Frost when she kills the guy who fought for her to be in the picture. And he then comes on to her and she takes him out without like the kind of, the trigger for how to get the powers to really work when she's in that kind of state. And taking him out was a really big moment for that character in this episode.
Oh, yeah. And again, just another level of the sliminess in the midst of Hollywood and no good deed is done without someone wanting something more. Was definitely sad. Now, this was also kind of a cool little bit because it was the end here where Jack is introduced to Calvin Chadwick, Whitney's husband, who will be running for Senate, which is, of course, the headline that Peggy told Jack in the Arena Club, this is going to be tomorrow's headline. And sure enough, Jack finds that out at the end of the episode, revealing that, again, Peggy is definitely on top of things a little bit more than he would like her to, and is definitely going to be messing with his aspirations to be the next big muckety muck of whatever comes next. I believe is the phrase that Vernon used. All right, so our last episode we're going to talk tonight, I think perfectly timed out, Smoke and Mirrors, is of course really our Whitney Frost backstory episode, where we get to see where she came from, her actual brilliance, where her connection with all of this is, how she is secretly the one behind Isodyne and its experiments, and the brilliant person behind that.
But
Yeah.
But also this episode, like we talk about that, and like we've talked about that part of this episode already. But we didn't talk about how the counterpoint of this episode is Peggy's backstory, more of like showing these two women and the support that Peggy had from her brother and then showing the lack of support that Dottie had in her life. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was such a great, like counterpoint in this episode, and seeing like where Peggy got the courage to become what she becomes, but she had to lose her brother along the way. And, she was going to be she was kind of being pushed into the life that everybody told her to have, and so, and Dottie was being pulled into the life that she was going to be, forced into. And it's just how environment can play so much into what somebody becomes. And I think that was like the biggest part of this episode. And it was just nice to see more of Peggy's backstory and her brother and all that stuff, and him telling her, don't, this is what you want to do. Like this isn't, you're playing a part. And then later, Whitney's the one playing all the parts. Like Peggy becomes who she's meant to be. Dottie becomes who she has to be.
No, I think that's perfect. And yeah, I love it is the how much these characters are all similar to each other in many ways, and what their environment or support may have pushed them one way or the other to do. I think was perfect. God, I hate to be the one that keeps like harping on things. I gotta say though, I didn't like Peggy. I didn't like Peggy's background. I didn't like her, almost marrying and falling in love with stuff. To me, it undercut the strength of the character that we saw in First Avenger, who respected Steve and fell in love with that sort of viewpoint. For me, I kind of felt this early relationship bit kind of undercut that drive of character that is such a defining bit for Peggy. While I love that her response is sort of a balance off of her brother and that kind of interplay in that relationship, I enjoyed. I got to say, I thought that this undercut some of Peggy's strength, though it did play into a lot more of the relationship issues they talk about this season. So I don't know if that choice was made because of that.
So you haven't ever done something just because your family wants you to do it?
No, they hate me for that.
I didn't mind it. I felt like it showed kind of how much she was being worn down just by the world in general. And even her brother pointed that out. He said something about you've just let everybody else drum it out of you.
Sure.
So I was okay with that, because then her brother putting her up for this position with the SOE and believing in her kind of opened that door for her to choose to like be who she wanted to be, instead of feeling like she was trapped in a role. So basically we have both characters go kind of through the same thing, right? Whitney Frost is playing a role. Peggy was playing a role, as Rob said.
Right.
And I mean, he knows that she's not making a decision that is one that she wants. It's for everybody else, right? Like he tells her about, what does he say? Is he honestly the love of your life? No, he's not.
We're all like, no, what is she doing? That's crazy, man. What? Yeah. No,
You know?
it's just I did like the character interplay, and again, that kind of balance and back and forth that they get to do with Whitney and Peggy and all of that. I think it did work. And again, considering some of the relationship stuff they try to do this season, all of that really makes sense. Again, from a character choice, that's good. Just for Peggy's particular character, I gotta say that's the only reason I didn't like it, just because I thought that it undercut some of her strength that we saw her beforehand. It's like she had to be weak and then be strong and then be weak again. When they do that too much back and forth, I don't know. I don't like it. But that's,
well, we know that she doesn't meet Steve till after her brother dies and after she calls everything off with Fred, and so I mean, what we see is that Peggy eventually chose not to marry Fred. And what Whitney did is she married her Fred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like a different two roads diverged in the wood, and they went different ways, and then their life plays out the consequences of that choice.
Mm-hmm.
If you're engaged, no stress. This message is not for you.
That's right. That's right. Don, Rob, you guys any thoughts? We also have, of course, Hunt's the arena club hitman being captured and let loose in this. Who just gets to play the kind of heavy, but I think he always plays the heavy really well. Any thoughts on any of these?
Yeah. So, getting to see Peggy's backstory. I mean, Darren, you said you're not a big fan, but I like the fact that they show it was kind of a throwback to season 1, but kind of in reverse to a certain extent, because there she's with other women who've been doing code breaking during the war, and it kind of shows one of the big differences between the way the British were doing things versus the way the Americans were doing things, because I don't think that there wouldn't have been a woman who would have been put in a position in the United States military as Peggy was in the British military.
Right.
So she was the liaison, from the Brits to the Americans. You kind of see, like, in Captain America, you saw how the soldiers, especially Gilmore Hodge, was like, oh yeah, Gilmore Hodge, Your Majesty, yeah, you were gonna wrestle and all that, but it kind of shows the difference in the way society viewed women at the time in the two countries.
Yeah.
Right? So fast forward to her turning down the job, because you got to think about it. Her mom had told her when she was younger, when she wanted to be a knight, apparently, out there slaying dragons and saving damsels in distress. Her mom was like, "What are you doing? No, you're supposed to act like a lady." So that being ingrained in her head for probably years on end, she's thinking, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And it wasn't until the death of her brother, after her brother, kind of reminded her, like, look, you were a rebel. You're not the person who does the things that fit in.
Right.
You like to stand out. So, like, come on, you're marrying this guy who basically is a pencil pusher, and talking about a boring life is a privilege. Like, come on now. And she's still, at that point was thinking to herself, nah, but I have to do what's expected of me. And after her brother dies, it was like, you know what? No, he was right. And I think a major motivation for her, was his death. I mean,
Yeah.
It's funny because for the most part, I think that if the gender roles if the genders would have been reversed, people might have said that Peggy being killed uh, would have been a case of fridging. I'm not sure if you guys know what that is.
Sure,
So,
sure.
yeah, I haven't seen the criticism about, oh, well, you just you know, this male character to give the female character something to do, because yeah, I don't think I don't think it's a fair criticism on either side. You have certain traumatic events that happen to people that spur them to make changes in their life.
Sure.
You can't just all boil it down to, oh, well, you only did that because you wanted to be sexist or whatever may have you. But I'm going off on a tangent. The point that I'm trying to make is I personally liked them showing Peggy's progression and the fact that she's always kind of had that independent fighting spirit, and even though for a moment it was kind of even for a moment, she put it on the back burner because she was trying to live up to certain expectations. It was like once she realized that wasn't what was going to make her happy in life, she went for what was going to be fulfilling to her. So, I like I said, personally, I liked it, and I wish we would have had maybe a little more to round out the story. I think there's maybe one or two scenes that might be missing there to kind of round things out and bring it full circle.
Yeah, I would go with that. I mean, one of the criticisms of this episode of this season, even though at 10 episodes it's got a lot of time, is some of the aspects did feel a little rushed, specifically towards the ending and such. But this was one of those where it might have had a little bit more impact if you had more of those moments. But like I had mentioned before, the other big kind of thing that you have here is the hitman Rufus Hunt from the Arena Club, trying to take out Peggy and Jarvis, and he gets captured with just kind of the nice little tough guy scene of, do your worst, which you kind of always love. But you've got to have these set up because you have to show just how badass your villain is. And if somebody's not going to willingly give you information, let them go. Bug them. Just follow where they go. And you can hear everything and you get all the info. Unless, of course, your antagonist sucks them into some dark matter universe, which ends up being his ultimate fate. What does happen? Is that just dark force coming out and just sucking them into the next dimension? Is that what's going on here? Do they get bubbled? Do they get transformed? I'm not sure if we ever really kind of clarify that.
Do they go to like the dark dimension, nightmare dimension? Or are they, I don't know. I every time I look at that character, I just laugh because I only hear Peggy's line of, I gave him an intense cold cup of tea. And he's like, hey! In the other room screaming.
Oh, yeah. No. There was definitely a lot of fun to have in with this. Imaginative moments. But yeah, I think that pretty much gets us our sort of setup. At this point, we have a clear of who the good guys, the bad guys. We've gotten our Whitney background. Chadwick understands the darkness within his wife, literally within his wife, and the plans with the Arena Club and what's going to happen start to twist off. Next episode, Whitney has an idea on how to get some more dark matter, but we're going to hold that off until next week. So next week, same bat time, same bat station. I have to say that because I'm old. I know it's Marvel, but the point being is next week, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, we will be continuing this conversation, talking about the second half, the back half of Agent Carter. We're going to talk about a lot of the sub characters, smaller characters, side characters. We didn't get a chance to get into too much. A lot more fun, a lot more bit, and then of course in 2 weeks. Same time, 6 o'clock on Thursdays, we're going to start our run discussion of Loki. So, before we wrap things up, anybody want to have any final thoughts, add-on bits before we sign off for our part one?
We did have Souza give us a Steve Rogers line where he said to Peggy, "I'm with you to the end, Peggy."
Nice. I missed that one.
Nice. Yep. And they mentioned that Peggy was working at Bletchley Park, and that was actually a really well-known secret coding center during World War II. So not only was she working as a coder, she was working at like the top of the top coding location, which might also indicate why she was picked by the SOE. And her brother says to her, "Don't worry what other people think and stop pretending to be someone you're not." So I thought that was good advice.
Good advice. Well, certainly guided Peggy throughout the rest of her life. And I love the fact that she's drawing it for the memory of her brother. Don, Rob, any final thoughts on your ends? No?
Again, interesting first half of the season. A lot of setup for things to come down the line, obviously. And a great change of pace from season one. Still light in tone, but yet serious where it needed to be. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, I look, it's canon. I don't care what anyone says. The same actor who was Edwin Jarvis in here was also in Endgame, therefore canon.
You have no argument for me, sir. I think we'll all agree with you on that one. Yeah.
One other thing I didn't comment on because I wasn't sure if it was in this episode. We have the scene with Peggy trying on the wedding dress, and that's when we hear the news that Michael has been killed in action during the war. I don't know about you. I was crying. She was crying. We were all crying. That scene was very well acted. Kudos to Haley Atwell for that scene because, that got me. And it was just, they did it in such a simple way. And you just have that scene of her with the suitcase and the dress is hung up and she puts the ring on the counter and she walks out the door. And it was just, I think, so well done. And I also loved this scene after the explosion with Wilkes, where you have her coming out. And it kind of reminded me of Melinda after the girl dies and Phil like, "Melinda, are you okay?" And she kind of has that breakdown. And I like that Marvel shows strong female characters having a breakdown because oftentimes Hollywood likes to present strong characters as strong all the time. Or, you can't be a strong feminist or a strong female and be crying about something because, get it together, woman, right? Like, no, that's not reality. We cry. We have hearts. We get upset about things. And I love that Jarvis was the person who was there to help her. I mean, Souza obviously was there, but she wasn't crying on his shoulder.
No.
Jarvis, who was like, "Can I," she says, "Mr. Jarvis, may I please have a ride home?" And she's just about ready to burst into tears. But I liked seeing a very strong character like that having those moments because it makes her more human, more realistic. And it lets the viewer see that, okay, if Peggy can cry about something, I can cry about something. That's okay.
Well, and I think it sets up well because they are able to establish that this is not a typical thing, but this is a human reaction to it. So they don't have to be the, oh, yes, always emotional kind of reaction. It can really be like, oh, this is a strong person finally letting something come in and affect them. So, yeah, I agree with you on that one. All right. So, everyone, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody that joined us so patiently here in the chat. Silva Surfa, Devontae Smith, Barbaro, Envy Warren had stopped in for a little bit as well. So thank you. Everybody was able to join us in the chat. Thank you, everyone who is joining us in the archives. And we will see you all next week. Thanks so much. And bye-bye. Dun, 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 dun. Gotta hit some buttons for us to close out.